Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dan Martonis from Cattaraugus County Real Property Services, and he's going to present to you on real property revaluations. Dan?
Take it away. All right. Thanks, Sarah. All right. I'm going to share my screen here so we can start the PowerPoint. All looks good, I assume. So you're here today to learn about a revaluation / reassessment and why it's needed. So you'll see those revaluation reassessments words be bandied about. They mean about the same thing. And because we're human beings, we shorten revaluation to reval. So that's what you'll hear the most is why you got to do a reval. And I say the hopefully not too boring edition. I talk in layman's terms, very candid about things. I won't go into the minutia of everything because there's a lot to this whole process, but I'm not going to bore you with too much of it. But this should take about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll go into the Q&A after that. So feel free to ask your questions along the way or wait till the end because I might go over some stuff as we go through this. I'm Dan Martonis, Director for Real Property Tax Services at Cattaraugus County. I've been with the county for almost 20 years now. I started out as a GIS coordinator working in real property. I did that for a number of years, learned about assessing, went to the classes, became an assessor outside of work, assessed for a few municipalities. Then when my predecessor, Nancy Barney, retired, I became the director. And once you're the director for a county, you can't assess within that county. So I had to drop my towns and just be the director. And I've been that for going on 10 years now. So that's me. And here's the presentation. Equalization rate. Yes, we do have to start there. One of the most confusing parts of this whole thing is the equalization rate. It's easy to have your eyes glaze over anytime someone mentions it. Even in the business, it's going to take you a good couple of years before you completely wrap your head around the equalization rate, what it's there, what its uses are, how it's used. So I'm just going to give you kind of a broad overview of it and give you some examples. So first, the equalization rate is computed by the New York State Office of Real Property Tax Services. They're actually mandated by New York State law to come up with an equalization rate for every single assessing jurisdiction across the entire state. They have to do this every year. And they use local and regional data. And in some future slides, I'll get into tell you more about what regional data means. So what the heck is it? It's used to bring all the assessed values up to full market value. So if you haven't done a reval, if you're not at 100%, your assessed values are just a level of assessment at the time your last reval was done. So say you did a reval in the year 2000, all your assessed values are equal to what those properties were worth in the year 2000. An equalization rate brings those assessed values up to what those properties should be worth in today's market. So if your reval was done in 2000, the EQ rate, whatever it is, brings up all the values to say what it's worth today. So here's an example for you. So say we have two houses, two identical houses, neighbors to each other, built at the same time. We'll say both built in 1960. At that time, they were both assessed for $5,000. And I just chose 1960. It doesn't matter. You can choose 70, 80, 90, year 2000. I'm just using this as an extreme example. So both built in 1960, both assessed for the same price of $5,000. That's what they could get on the open market through a realtor back in 1960. So let's take those. You got house A on the left, house B on the right. Like I said, they're neighbors to one another. But now let's throw this imaginary line in there. This imaginary line is a town line. So now you have that house A is in a different town than house B. So let's say house A is in a town, they completed the reval in 1960. So it's still assessed at $5,000. They have done nothing since 1960. And yes, this can happen in your county. This can happen across the state. I have two municipalities in my county right now that are early 1970s was the last time they completed a reval. Before that, the earliest I had was a town that was, it just said pre-1952. They had no idea when it was last, but that went through a reval just about 7 years ago. So they're finally up to date. But let's say that that house on the left there is assessed at $5,000 today. House B is in a different town. They go through a reval this year, and now House B is assessed at $100,000. So House A, 5,000, House B, 100,000, that's what their assessments are. So now let's extend a tax that's not a town tax. Let's say it's a county or school tax, one that goes beyond the boundaries of just a town. So now you're going to have a county tax extended onto House A and House B with no equalization rate in play. So if we do that, let's say the county comes up with a tax rate of $10 per assessed value. They do their budgets, the levy that comes out to $10 per assessed value, per $1,000 of assessed value. So if you take that tax rate and extend it to House A, they're going to pay $50 in county taxes. Nice deal. If you take that and send it to House B, which is now worth $100,000, they'd be paying $1,000 in county taxes. So without an equalization rate, you can see the disparity right there. Not really fair. So you need that equalization rate to make sure that taxes outside of town are being taxed as fair as can be. So those are county taxes and school taxes. So that's it for that. But what does it actually do within a town border? So the quick answer for within a town, nothing when it comes to the tax rates. It's just an equalization rate for tax rates that extend outside. But there's more. Let's take those two houses again, those two identical houses. Now they're in the same town. But let's say that the one house is on the southern border of the town and the other house is towards the northern border of the town. Well, we've seen what the EQ rate can do for taxing purposes for county and school, but what does it do for assessing purposes within that town? Let's think about it. Do all homes increase and decrease in value throughout the whole town equally? I take my example of the town of Great Valley in my county. Those two houses built in 1960, one in the northern, one in the southern part. The northern part saw the big boom of Holiday Valley right in Ellicottville. The northern line for Great Valley is right up against Ellicottville. And the southern line is right down more towards Killbuck region. So I can tell you for certain that that northern house increased greatly, much faster in value than the southern house did. Or maybe you can say that that southern house is worth 100,000. Well, probably that northern house might be worth 300,000, 350,000 today. But if no reval's done, then they're both being assessed for the exact same assessment. And they're both being taxed the exact same way, even though that northern house is worth much more than that southern house. But you can think about it for other purposes too, like vacant land, farmland, commercial properties. Another example for let's say for farmland, my northern towns, and this goes for Chautauqua County towns along Lake Erie in the fertile grape region. Allegheny has good like prime farmland versus poor farmland as well. My northern towns have a lot of prime farmland, but like my town of Ashford, that's in the north, their northern properties in that town have prime farmland that I see selling for $3,000 an acre, but the southern farmland is selling for $1,000 an acre. Maybe that didn't take into play earlier on. You had so many small farms being farmed all over the place, but now especially as you have big corporations buying up all these small farms, they're paying a premium for good for farms that are on good soil, prime farmland, and they could be that $3,000 an acre. But if you're not doing revals, you're not catching all these different sales figures that are coming in. So all in all, the equalization rate is just one number that bakes in everything that we're talking about into one number for the whole town. So one number for residentials, et cetera. And we'll go into the components of an equalization rate now. There are 4 parts to it: the residential, the commercial, vacant farm and vacant lands, and then utilities. So ORPS, Office of Real Property Tax Services, you'll hear me calling them ORPS throughout this. They have to come up with a value for each of these 4 parts and then one value for all of them. So here's an example of an actual town in Cattaraugus. This is one of the towns a couple years back. These were the numbers that ORPS came up with. They're saying that the residentials, based on their figures, were coming in at about 48% of what they're being assessed at. So the assessment was 48% of what they're selling for, sorry. The commercial is coming in at about 42.5% of what they're actually selling for on the open market today. You can see this is a town that's in a revale in a long time. But then you got farm and vacant that are coming in at about 30%. And utility is unique on its own, just utilities that are in there, in that town. And they're coming up, so the total of all those, and it's not just a sum, you can't just add them all together and divide by 4. They're different weighted. And then like, let's look at the 4 parts a little bit more. I wanted to go back to say that ORPS looks at like residential. So the residential market that they're coming up with at 48%. In my county, they're looking at all residential sales throughout the entire county minus Ellicottville. So it doesn't matter if the sale was in Perrysburg or in Portville, they're using that sale to come up with your equalization rate for residentials. They just exclude Ellicottville because that's its own market. Commercial is a bigger area. They include all of Chautauqua County, all of Cattaraugus County, all of Allegheny County. And the reason they do this is because there's not a lot of commercial sales out there. And I just noticed I spelled commercial wrong. Geez. They need a bunch of sales to make the market. So the adage goes is that one sale doesn't make a market. You need a lot of sales to dictate, hey, this one ranch home sold for 5% more than what it's valued at. Doesn't necessarily mean that every other ranch home in your town went up 5%. You need a number of sales to show that, hey, there's a trend happening here. They all go up 5%. So that's why they need the bigger area to look at. The state does for commercial. Same with farm and vacant lands. They take Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, Allegheny, and 3/4 of Steuben County. They don't take the northern part because that's more towards the Finger Lakes. But they take everything else and they look at those and they say, based on all these sales in this whole area, your vacant farms are coming in about 30% of what you have them assessed at. You have them at 30% assessed value. Utility is unique. That's only for those utilities within that town. But they do all this computations and they put in what's called a CAMA module. And we're not going to go into that. I don't even understand that because they don't let you have access to it. But they put it through all their procedures and then they come up with one number. So they say, okay, your town is ECRATE is 44%. So that means every property they're saying is being valued at 44% of what it actually can get on the market. So if you just look at that number alone, this is just for a town, if I'm a resident in that town, I'm already saying, wait, I'm at 48%. So you already have me 4% higher than what I should be. But then I also notice farm and vacant lands, they're at 30%. So right away, that means that farm and vacant aren't paying their fair share of the tax. I'm paying some of the tax that they should be paying. So as your equalization rate drops, these numbers get more out of whack. And that's one of the main reasons for a town to want 100%. And we'll get into more in a minute here. So is there ever a time that you never have to worry about an equalization rate? Yes, you maintain 100%, and as a town, you don't have to ever think about it. The assessor still will, but you won't have to. Just get to 100%, stay at 100%, and you don't really care about the equalization rate. You can just forget everything that I was just talking to you about. The only way to get to 100% is to do a reval. You get a reval and you maintain it. So you do updates and then another reval and then some more update years and then the reval. And it just it's easier that way. You don't have to wait years in between revals and have much more work when you go to do it again. So what are the benefits of maintaining it at 100%? Well, the number one benefit is if you're at 100%, you can tell your municipal taxpayers that they're paying as close to their fair share as possible. When a town's at 100%, you can tell them, I know for a fact that you're paying as close to your fair share as possible for town taxes. Now, the problem with county and school taxes is that the only way that they can tell them that they know that they're paying their fair share is if all the municipalities in a school district at 100%, or all the municipalities in a county at 100%. We only have 2 counties in all of New York State that are at 100% throughout the entire county. So they can say they're the only 2 counties in the entire state that can tell all their taxpayers that, hey, we know for a fact you're paying your fair share of all the taxes, unless the school district goes outside the county into another county that's not at 100%, unfortunately. But that's also an issue for our county legislators, because they, like last year, take for example, they reduced they kept the budget level, but we had a lot more taxable value because of state-owned land stuff that went on, that the tax rate per thousand actually got reduced by $2 a thousand. It went from like $12 to $10 a thousand. So the article in the paper was that the county legislators have reduced the overall tax rate. That's all well and good until you get to a town whose equalization rate might have dropped that year. If you're at 100%, you saw that savings in your county taxes. Your tax rate did go down and your county taxes did go down. But let's say you're at a town that was at 70% and now your EQ rate fell to 65. That means the overall value of your property went up for county tax purposes and for school and for town. But we're talking about county here. So your overall value went up, meaning that you got paid a bigger share of the pie. So the county legislators will say the tax rate went down, and then you could look at your tax bill and go, well, my county taxes went up. How can that be? And then you got to try to explain to the taxpayer, well, it's because your equalization rate dropped. Therefore, your property is worth more money for county and school purposes, and therefore you have to pay more in taxes. Well, that's a hard thing to get through to the taxpayers. So it's just easier to be at 100%. And that way, you know, they're paying their fair share. You also don't have to spend for revals anymore. We'll get into how to do a reval and different ways and different costs of revals, but they can be expensive. I mean, I had a rural town of 1,200 parcels having to pay $86,000 a couple of years ago for a reval. I had a town that had 3,000 parcels that were quoted over $300,000 for a reval. Once that 2% tax cap came into play, we saw a dramatic drop of municipalities doing revals because they're so expensive and it's hard to fit into budgets, especially for smaller towns. Even if the reval companies extend it out 3 years and you pay, a third every year, it's still hard to do. That's one of the things that's easy for town boards and others to say, well, let's forget about that, and because we have, DBW trucks to worry about more. But your taxpayers aren't paying their fair share. That's near and dear to my heart. So I gotta say, you want to be at 100%. And once you're there, you don't have those big spending anymore. You spend only a little bit every year to get it, to keep it at 100%. Therefore, you never have to spend that big amount again. There's also a little incentive program by the state. Unfortunately, I've only ever seen this decrease throughout the years. It's something they instituted many, many years ago to incentivize municipalities to be at 100%. They'll give you up to $5 per parcel when you do a reval. And depending on how long your project is, it'll either be the first year you get $5, and then the fourth year you get another $5 because you're doing another reval at that time, or if it's a 5-year project, you get in the 5th year. So it's not much, but it's something. If you have $1,000 in your 1,000 parcels in your town, you're getting back $5,000. So it's something. And of course, I gotta mention it because it's something that I hit home all the time. If you're not at 100, they're not paying their fair share. That's the only way you can get it. I mean, that's the most talked. The biggest talking point that we hear the most, especially in the assessing world, even though we don't have anything to do with taxes, other than the taxes get put on to what we assess the properties at. We're just trying to assess properties to say what they are in the open market, but the property owner, still coming in because it's their taxes that they want to talk about. And the number one thing that they say is, okay, I get it. I got to pay taxes. I got to pay taxes for roads and for sheriffs and et cetera. I get that. I just want to make sure I'm paying my fair share. And if you're not at 100%, you cannot tell them that they are paying their fair share. So how to complete a reval. So there are two ways now. There used to be three ways. Back in the day, many years ago, you could have an assessor on board that might be able to do it themselves. You don't really find that at all today. It's few and far between to find. Just because the job has gotten much more complicated than it was, 20, 30 years ago when they could do it by themselves. It's too complicated. So I say that there are two ways to do it now. One on the cheap, and two is to hire an expensive company. So if you want to do it on the cheap, you must have an extremely competent assessor. And there are many extremely competent assessors out there. I got a bunch in my county, I know. There's a lot of them that are good out there. That's up to you, the municipal employees, the town boards, and et cetera, to know if your assessor is competent. Hopefully you have one. They got to be good at their job. You have to have great data, and not just good data. I'm talking about great data. I've seen it firsthand when you get the taxpayer revolts, the angry people, is one, the reval did not start off with good data. And by that, I mean, yeah, the assessor software shows that there's a barn that's 40 by 50 and in normal condition, and the cost gets associated to it, and it's worth $30,000. Well, when you go out and see that barn, you find that the roof's caving in, it's not even being used. It might even be a detriment to the property. So that's not good data. You got to have good data for a reval. And if you're going this way, you got to be willing to pay the assessor more. That's going above and beyond their normal operations. The assessor's normal work, especially in our regions where you're still paying assessors like a part-time job. So that's how it's kind of being treated. You're paying the assessor $8,000, $10,000, $14,000 a year to do the work that they have to do to maintain the role. So they're putting on sales every month. They're sending out letters. They're driving around their towns to discover, list, and value properties. They're putting on new builds. They're taking a couple months to do all the exemption work that goes along with it. So now you're asking them, if you want to do a reval on the cheap, you're asking them to probably do all the data collection. They got to go to every single property, take a picture of every single property. You sit on the computer day and night going through aerial photos, looking at building permits, all that stuff that they're doing to make sure that the good data is there. So then they can pay an outside company to do the valuation. That's where you find the stickiest points, is that the valuation is the hardest part of a reval. Everything else is a lot of legwork, a lot of grunt work, a lot of work that they got to do. But then the valuation side of things, you get into the software and making PIDs and doing trends and doing all this other stuff. That's the hardest part of a reval. And unfortunately, if you're doing it on the cheap, there used to be a couple people out there, they're mostly retired ORPS personnel, that you could hire for maybe 20 grand to do the valuation. You do all the other work, the assessor does, and then this person will do the valuation stuff because it's kind of like a retirement job for them, little extra income. They know about it, they've been in it forever, so you can do it on the cheap. Unfortunately, the last one that I know of who does this, he was actually out of Rochester, he passed away last year. So I don't know of many out there. I don't know of any, but maybe someone else will know that as a retired person that will do it on the cheap. So you probably have to go to one of the bigger companies. There are a lot of them out there across the state, but you'll probably have to go to those companies to ask them to do the valuation. So, instead of maybe 20,000, maybe you're paying them 40,000. I have no idea until you go out them and go to them and ask them how much it is just for the valuation side. So if you don't do it on the cheap, if you're afraid of any of those things, you can just hire a company to do it. So for this, definitely recommend to get multiple quotes. And this is where you're going to rely on your assessor again, because there's a web page out on ORPS. So the assessor will go and they keep a listing of all the different reval companies across all of New York State. And your assessor will say, okay, these ones are good. I know these ones, I worked with these ones are close. Let's get multiple quotes from all these. And you can do that by using an RFP. The state has an RFP out there as a template that you can utilize. Again, your assessor will know what their data is like. Maybe they already have pictures for every one of their parcels out there, so you don't have to worry about having a company take pictures. That could be one thing that could be nixed from the RFP. But they'll go over it and they'll say, okay, we need these things done for a good reval. And again, since they're doing a little more work, you might want to, know that you're going to have to pay your assessor a little bit more that year to help with the reval. I mean, ultimately, it's their name that goes on the roll. So they're signing off that all these values are good. So even if they're not doing number one, number two, all that data comes back from the company, the assessor's got to double check everything and make sure that their values are correct, because it's their name that goes on the roll. So they are definitely doing more work that year for a reval. So how we do it at the county, just to go back, how to complete a reval. So you do all this stuff, you spend all this money on either doing it on the cheaper or doing it expensively. It always gets me when a municipality spends all this money and then they don't keep it updated. They don't stay at 100%. And then 2 years later, they're down to 97%. Another couple years go by, they're down to 92%. Another couple years, they're down in the 80s all of a sudden. So why would you spend all that money and then not spend just a little money each year after that to keep it at 100%? It's like, I equate it to, you install an asphalt driveway in front of your house, it costs you $10,000 to install the driveway, but then you never do any sealing or tarring in a decade. So the driveway wears down, and all of a sudden in 10 years, you got to spend another 10 grand to put in another new driveway instead of spending only a couple $100 every year to keep it updated. So if you do go to 100%, please maintain 100%. You could probably go to 100% and maybe throw your assessor a couple extra $1,000s a year to keep it at 100%. Maybe in year 4 or 5, they might have to hire a company only for a few thousand to make sure the valuation is good. Or maybe they learn it in-house, whatever, however you deal with it with your assessor, just maintain that 100%. So that's ECRATES. That's why you should maintain 100%. That's how to complete a reevaluation. So how do we do it at the county? So years ago, I went to the legislature when I knew the last 6-year appointment was coming up. I expected a lot more of my assessors to be retiring. Some did before then. Some are still on, which is good. But I knew that there was going to be like this black hole, because assessing is a unique job. There is no school for assessing. You don't learn it in high school. You can't take college courses for it. You can't even take the state courses for it unless you already work for a municipality in some assessing fashion, a clerk or something. So the only way us rural areas are getting new blood into the assessing field is if, say, you have a family member who was an assessor and they say, hey, come along, I'll teach you how to do this. You could be my clerk. In my entire county, I only have one municipality that employs more than one person in the assessing field. That's the city of Olean. They have 2 people working. So that's my only avenue, as in for job wise, for someone to become a assessment data clerk or something and work their way up into becoming an assessor. So you just don't find that new blood out there. There's not a lot of new assessors on their horizon. So I knew this was going to be an issue. I wanted to get it through to the county legislature that we need to start looking at county assessing to be there as an option for the towns. So when that happened, we were able to partner with 13 towns. So that's how many towns we got in our county. And what I offer these towns are, we're going to get you to 100% for no additional cost. We're going to get you to 100%. We're going to keep you at 100%, because that's also what the county legislators want to see, because the more towns at 100%, then the more, when they say we decreased or kept your tax rate flat, that's actually what is seen on the tax bill. So that's a good thing. So that's what we're doing. We're in our 3rd year. We got 5 towns now up to 100%, and we try to do about 2 towns a year to get all 13 up to 100%. So this is how we do it, just to give you a feel of what a reval is like. And it's not, I'm a little bit biased, but I'll say that I think that we do more than one of those big companies would do. So this is what we do. We start at least a year out. Like I'm saying, we just finished Freedom and Machias's revals. Machias, the letters went out from Machias just a couple weeks ago. We're already starting on our next 2 towns. We're in the informal period for our reval towns currently, but we're already starting on next year's towns right now because it takes a long time to do this work. And that's with, I have 5 people in my assessing office working on these things. So step 1, now these aren't necessarily steps you take in order. These are just a bunch of different steps. So one of the things that we start with is the computer work, the in-house work, aerial photography. We are lucky to have very good imagery, aerial imagery. We take every 3 years through pictometry. And it's not just straight down shots. These are angled shots as well. So you can see every side of the buildings, every side of the parcels. You get to see really, really good detailed. This year, we actually got 3-inch imagery, which means every pixel is 3 inches. So you can get really detailed stuff. Plus, we can use pictometry software to measure. So we can draw around the house and get the square footage of the house. So this is how we start. We look at every single parcel aerial imagery on. We look at what the V4 data, that's the assessor software. We look at what is in there for that parcel. If this parcel, for instance, has a house on it, perfect, we're good. I don't see any, I think there might be an attached garage. I don't see any barns or anything, but maybe we'll measure that house and see that it's, 3,000 square footage just on the measuring, but for some reason our software is only saying 1,000. Well, that's going to be a discrepancy that we would want to send a data mailer out to. But also, like I said, the good imagery we have, you can zoom right in. So I can say, hey, that looks like maybe an all-home air conditioning unit there. Maybe that's good data that we would want to put into our assessor software. So you can really get that good imagery, and we do this for every parcel. And like I said, anything with those big discrepancies, then we would say, okay, we got an issue here. We don't have all the data for this property. We're going to send the owner an inventory mailer and say, hey, this is what we found. Can you please give us more information about it? Because we're not going to go out to the house. We're not going to knock on the door. We're not going to drive up the driveway. We initiate it with the data mailer and see what we get back. Another step we take is the land breakout. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. You have land values, and after you do a reval, land can be broken out: primary, residual, secondary, tillable, wasteland, pasture, woodland. There are many different breakouts of land, and each one of those has a per acre cost associated to it. Even goes even further. You can have different costs as soon as you reach a different threshold, like 100 acres versus 200 acres, et cetera. So all that value, and that's all taken from actual sales that are happening throughout the town for land. All of that comes into place. You want to make sure that your land is broken out correctly, especially when you get into the larger acre parcels. So we break out land, and I'll give you an example. This is a screenshot of the assessor software for one of our towns. It was before we did the reval. So we look at this. We use GIS and aerial photography in different layers that I'll talk about in a minute to break out this land. So this is what the previous assessor had: primary acres, residual, 56 in tillable, and 53 in pasture. This is what it looks like after we break it out with GIS. There's a lot more land there. Some of it is doubled, but you'll see primary, residual, tillable, woodland, wasteland, wetland. And not only that, the pasture's gone. Why? Because we looked at the aerials and we drive the roads and there is no pasture land there. There was no pasture land. This has been incorrectly assessed with pasture land for gosh knows how long. I don't know. But you'll also see that the tillable is broken out into 2 different tillables. We got a 38 acres and we have a 43 acres. Why is that? Well, because we use soil. That's a big thing, especially on the farms and large tracts of land, to say, like I was talking about, prime farmland, 3,000 acre versus poor farmland, 1,000 acre. So these soil ratings have different amounts associated with them. They'll set different prices for this 38 acres versus 43. Same thing with the woodland, different soil types, different amount of acres. Wasteland, that's like your scrub brush. When we see it's just land that's not being utilized for anything, that will have a lower value to it than a woodland or a tillable. Wetland we use for actual floodplain stuff. You'll see this is 0.05 and you'll see it in the next screen. Why it's 0.05. Excuse me. So what we look at for different layers are those FEMA floodplains, the DEC wetlands, and that soil. So we get something that looks like this. This is our computer work before we even go out. The highlighted parcel is the one that we were just talking about. All this brown are color-coded tillable land. You see that 38, you see that 43. These are all calculated by the computer. You see this is the scrubland, this gray area. All this green is all the woodland that's associated with it. And that 0.05 was just barely into this FEMA floodplain down there, but we want to account for that. So we use that. There are no DEC wetlands on this property. But you can see these little gray lines behind it as well. Those are actually soil lines. So we know that the different types of soils, based on ag and markets, which soils are the prime soils, the good soils, the normal soils, the poor soils. And we have our soils broken out so we can give a good value according to what is actually on the property. And we work with the farmers a lot with this. When they say, hey, I don't think my land is valued correctly, we show them the breakout and we show them the aerials and we say, hey, give us more information if you don't think it is, what are you using this for, that type of thing. So next, another step that we do, all of this is just a one-time deal when we take over towns. When we partner with towns, we go through the last 3 years of all their building permits, just to make sure that all the data is there. We're doing this along with step one at the same time. So we make sure that the software that we use has all the correct data, that good data, like I talk about, you want that good, great data, because it's that garbage in, garbage out mentality. If you start with garbage, your assessments aren't going to be good. You want to make sure you have good data and the most up-to-date data as possible. We also go through the last 6 years of sales. Like I was talking about with the state having to use a large region to collect sales in a rural town, which most of the towns around us are, other than maybe an Ellicottville might only use like 3 years or so. Maybe a Jamestown is going to use only a few years. Most of our towns are using 5-6 years of sales because not much changes in 5-6 years for the most part, but you need to go back that much to collect sales to say, hey, we have enough sales on ranch homes now to justify increasing or decreasing this subset of properties. So we go back through those sales. We want to make sure that they're usable sales, that it's what's called arm's length transition, which is a willing buyer, a willing seller. And 99 out of 100 times it's through a realtor offered on the open market. We want to make sure that that sale doesn't include private property. That might be hard to find out because a lot of people don't include that on their 5217 because they're trying to avoid the tax. Because if you do include and say, hey, I sold a tractor with this property, then you have to pay tax on that tractor. So they just include it in the price. But if a property is valued at 100,000 and sold for 300,000, that might be a red flag. We're going to investigate that to see if it's an actual good sale or not. Bank sale, like bank foreclosures, we don't use. County foreclosures, we don't use. Generally, sales between relatives, we don't use because 99 out of 100 of those have something going on. So it's not a valid sale to use. But we want to make sure that they're good arm's length transitions, basically sold through a realtor. We also have to drive, when you do a reval, you drive every road. Even though you're using aerials and everything, you want to drive every road and take pictures from the roadside. We do just roadside assessing, and that's what it calls for in the assessor's manual, and that's what we do. It's illegal for an assessor just to like walk on your property through the woods or something. They can take the driveway up to the house. That's fine. That's legal. That's actually been ruled in court as being something that anyone can legally do. But if your driveway has a rope across it, they cannot take down the rope and drive up there. We don't even bother with that. It's all roadside stuff. We don't go to the house, knock on the door or anything. We want to make sure all of our data is good and we want to take pictures. And then it's up to the owners. If we put out the inventory, but we're assuming a lot of it's good unless we notice a big discrepancy. And then it's up to the owners to get back to us to say if it's not good or not, which we'll get into a little bit later. Another step is that we have to manually update a bunch of exemptions, like I talked about with the breaking out of land. So if those parcels have an agricultural exemption on them, we have to go in the ag worksheet and actually update those values according to what types of lands our new land is on, our new land breakout shows. There's also some other manual exemptions that the assessor has to go in and manually update during a reval year. And then the big one is that valuation. That's, like I said, the most costly one. That's you get your valuation expert. They take all the data that we've given them. They take all the usable sales that we've given them, and they make models, they make PIDs, they run it through all the software, and they say, based on all that, this is what we're coming in at. Then after all of that is done, now it's time to look to make sure everything's good. So we look at big discrepancies. Did a parcel's fair market value double or triple in price? We take all those parcels that either went down a lot or went up a lot, and then we do field work. We go out to those parcels and make sure that our data is correct, make sure that there was an error somehow. And all those ones that we don't go out to the field for, we use cost and comparable worksheets that it created through the valuation cycle to look at them and say, are all these comparables good? Are all these cost figures good for this property? So this is a double check, checks and balances for everything after all is said and done. After that, now it's time for mailing out the impact notices, and we include a very detailed letter with these notices. I'm going to show you an example of one of our letters. And this is another time, especially with COVID, during the informal cycle before COVID, normally what you would do is create a couple of nights, and you would have the people come in and you'd sit down with them at desks and say, okay, what's your issue? Let's go over some stuff. Give me your proof, and then we'll get back to you. Now, obviously, we're not meeting in person right now, so we've done this through a detailed letter to get information out. Because that's another huge part of a reval, is to make sure that the taxpayers understand what's going on and that you are there for them. If you mail out these impact notices, and I've actually had this happen, mail them out, and then the assessor goes on vacation for 2 weeks, that's not going to look good. Your taxpayers are going to be upset. You need to be there for them. So in our detailed letter, we go over everything with them, how to get a hold of us, etc., which I'll talk about in a minute. But the impact notices, they show what your tax bill would have been based on this new value that we just came up with. So you get all the data, you come up with these new values, you send out these letters, we look at the town as a whole, and you put it through the computations for the school, town, county, village taxes, if there are, and they say, if your house was valued, if your property was valued at this much last year, these are the taxes you would have paid. And this is an important letter because it will show, and it's a fact. And a lot of people don't believe it when I say it, but it's a fact that during a reval, your assessment, your full market value can increase, but your taxes can decrease. And if you just think about it, take a wild example, your value goes up 5,000, but every other property in the town goes up 10,000. Well, your taxes might go down because there's a bigger taxable value out there to spread the levies across. And so it's absolutely true. So you don't want to just say, hey, your value went up $10,000 and leave them guessing what that means, because they're going to automatically means my taxes are going up. But no, they may not. And you look at that bottom figure, your tax could actually go down. So that's what the impact notices show. And that's what we mail out every time that we do a reval. And then, like I said, we also include a letter. So this gives all the description of the whole process and information to get a hold of us. And here's the actual letter. This is one that just went out to all the Town of Freedom residents back in mid-February when we were done with their reval. And we just talk about it. We say it's for, here's the impact notice. It's for demonstrative purposes only. We give a little info about STAR, what that means, how it helps your school bill to go down. And then we say, hey, this is your full market value. If you don't agree with it, you can contact us. Here's where you can contact us. We put the form. We have an informal assessment form. We put it online. It's a fillable PDF. They can get it there. They can fill it out, send it to us. We'll mail it to them. We keep copies at the town halls. And we always have, hey, this is how you can get a hold of us. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30. We cut it off at 4:30 because usually the phone calls take a while and we only work till 5. Here's our email, etc. So you always want to give an avenue for the taxpayer to get a hold of someone. You don't want to send these out and then have in the letter, the assessor says, I'm at the town hall every third Monday of the month. because then you're going to have a line of 40 people out to town hall, and they're going to be disgruntled having to wait. This is actually, I think, a better way than even doing it sitting down at desks for informals, because they're calling us throughout the entire week. We can have a candid conversation for a half an hour on the phone with them. We're finding that the people who are calling us during our informal process, about a third of them just want information. And once we say what's going on, this is how it's done, and we say, do you want an informal application? They'll say no. And that's fantastic. The other 2/3 want that informal application, so we'll mail it to them. They can get it online if they wish. And we'll go over that in the next slide as well. But we also in this letter tell them, hey, you fill out that informal application, get it back to us. We'll then look at it and we'll decide if the data you give us, the proof you give us warrants a reduction or not. Then we'll tell you what your new value is if it does warrant some type of reduction, or we'll tell you it didn't. And we'll send out a letter telling you this. But we also say, if you're still dissatisfied in that, don't worry. Well, there's still another avenue to take, and that's grievance day. You can go to your local municipality's grievance day. We tell them right there in the letter when it is, and we even give them a web address to go to learn about grievance day and what to do if you disagree with your assessment, so they're well informed. A well-informed public is the best thing to have through this reval process, because if they're not well informed, they don't know what's going on. That's when you have that local coffee diner talk, and people are just, spouting their rumors and, oh, the town just wanted to do it to make more money. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. Budgets are the ones that establish levy, or, they have their wild rumors. We'll just leave it at that. I'm sure everyone here who works for municipality knows about those and hears them all the time. All right. So with that, here is our informal assessment review application. And we do this to try to give them pointers on what might be good information for them. The assumption of the law is that once the assessor's done, the assessor did their job and the assessment's good. So then it becomes the burden of proof is on the property owner to say, no, you're wrong because of this. So what are some good burdens of proof? What are some good proofs? They can, hey, if they offered their property up for sale, we look at the real estate market constantly, every day. We're looking at properties for sale, but maybe there's something we missed, or maybe it was a year ago before we had the town, whatever. Who was it listed with? So we can pull up the MLS number. Have they had it recently appraised? An appraisal is a really good piece of information to have if it's a good appraisal. An appraisal, you want properties that are nearest to that subject property, not ones that are in a county over, 30 miles away. So we've seen some bad appraisals, but the majority of them are good. So do you have an appraisal, send it to us. Is the inventory wrong? They can get all their inventory online through our iMate software and through our website. They can see how many bedrooms and bathrooms and square footage. Is that right? Is it wrong? Let us know what parts of it are wrong. Send this back to us. And then what they think that their fair market value is. And then again, like I said, they send this back to us. Then we do up another letter saying, yes, it was lower. No, it wasn't. And then if they still don't agree with it, they can go to the BAR. And then even after the BAR, there's the SCAR hearing, small claims assessment review for residential homes and vacant land smaller that you can't build a house on. And there's also Article 7, which is full-blown court, that there's other avenues for them to take. And we always get that information out to them. So with all that being said, basically almost hit my 45-minute mark. We're now into the questions. So I'll look at the Q&A as Sarah instructed me to do, and start looking through these. Okay, first one. Could you also address the value when one house does upgrades to the property and the other does not? Well, so if a house is doing upgrades, so you might have been talking about that identical house situation. Well, if one house is doing upgrades and one isn't, then yes, definitely that house doing the upgrades, doing additions, that's going to be valued higher. But basic maintenance, we don't value differently. So just maybe because one house put in new windows and the other house didn't, the assessor doesn't look at new windows and say, I'm going to raise your assessment. We don't look at a new roof and say, you're going to raise your assessment. We don't see that you put in a flower garden and you're going to raise your, that's all just typical maintenance stuff, yard work, whatever. We don't care about it. It comes down to the bones and the structure of the house. But if you're adding to it, if you're adding square footage, if you're adding a bathroom, those are the type of things that actually will add value to your house. You think about it in realty terms. Yeah, new windows are nice, but do they really add a lot of value? Just like solar panels right now, you can put solar on, but we're not finding that it's adding value. We have to look at the sales. And if all of a sudden houses with solar panels are being sold for more like houses that don't have solar panels, then maybe there's something there. Thing with solar is that usually you're paying a big upfront cost, or you're getting a loan to do it. So there's not a lot of value in the solar right now. Let's see, next. Is there any movement at Chautauqua toward county assessing? Yeah, ask Chautauqua County. No, not that I'm aware of in Chautauqua County. I know Allegheny, Joe Budinger over there, he wasn't really looking at it, but I know there's some interest from different county legislators, because like I talked about before, the legislators like the 100% because they don't like saying we decrease your taxes and then the town goes down in E-crate and then their taxes actually go up. But no, none that I know of in Chautauqua County towards that county assessing. And I don't think Allegheny is going towards it. They got through their big hump right now. I don't know exactly what they're going on. In my county right now, we just sit by until towns say that they want us. And then we look at my personnel and see if we can take them on board. That's how we're working it out. Can assessors do inspections while a house is being built? Is this normal practice? Sure, yeah. So when a house is being built or anything's being built on the property, the assessor has what's called taxable status date, and that's March 1st of every year. So whatever is on the property as of March 1st, that's what they have to assess for. So if a house is being built as of March 1st, you want to actually know if that house is completed or not. So you'll work with a building code enforcer, see if it's got a certificate of occupancy, maybe it's completed then. But if it's not, you're looking from the roadside, maybe you're going to reach out to the home property owner, maybe you don't, and you see that's a certificate, and you see from the outside it looks like it's completed from the roadside, so you put it on as completed, and then the owner will get that change of assessment, and then they'll say, oh no, it's not completed. Here's pictures of the inside of my house, or come on and do a walkthrough with me. So then you'll put it on as a percentage. So if it's only half done, you might figure out what the value is as a full house and then drop it by 50%. And then for us, that goes on our list for ones to look at year after year. So when it comes closer to March 1st, we're going out to the property owner saying, okay, last year as of March 1st, your house was only 50% done. What is it now? Is it normal to increase property value for what it was sold for? Well, yes and no. Like I said, one sale doesn't necessarily make a market, but if there are a lot of sales of those same types of properties, then yes, it can be. During a reval, if a property just sells and it's a good sale, arm's length transition sale, you can definitely use that sale as saying, well, we're trying to figure out what it's being sold for on the open market. We have a good sale, so therefore, that's what it's worth on the open market. But generally, you want a lot more sales of like properties to come up with values, because you can have that, and we've seen it before. You know, someone from Texas comes up and they're like, "Oh my God, properties are really cheap up here," and they buy that residential house, and they go, "Oh man," they get in a bidding war or something, and they spend. The people wanted 100,000, they spend 120 for it, and then all of a sudden they find out, oh, they're cheap because the taxes are kind of high too. So now they're saying, well, no, it's not worth $120,000. And that is one sale. So maybe you had that not unwilling buyer, but uninformed buyer. Maybe you take that into play. It really come down to individual properties. Can the state force you to do a reval? No, there is no enforcement of revals. It's constantly in the legislature to say, hey, we should, we should pass a bill saying that everyone has to do a reval every 4 years. The problem with that is that that's a huge mandate. I mean, they would be putting it onto the towns to spend $100,000 to do a reval. So that will never fly. I don't think that would ever gain traction or ever get passed through the state. So the only thing that they can do is keep doing those equalization rates. Send you a copy of the presentation. So Sarah, she's got a PDF of it, but they're going to put up this presentation over YouTube. So you can just send them a link to the Southern Tier West YouTube page. To all your supervisors and board members, please send it out. It would actually help me because I give the same presentation to 32 towns every few years. So yeah, it'll be on YouTube, and I believe Sarah has a PDF. I would definitely send them to the YouTube one because that's going to have me talking more in depth about things. And hopefully it'll just be an hour long, so it won't be that bad. Do you say there's software to complete a self-assessment on our personal property? There's not really software to do it. You can do comparables and sales comparables and assessment comparables through our Cattaraugus County website if you're in Cattaraugus County. Other than that, the appraiser will have their own software to do it. The assessors have their own software to do it. If your county has something similar like that we have with our IMate software, you can do some comparables. It's not the most in-depth, but it's a good start for you to do it. Is it required for municipality to advertise their intent of starting a reval? It's not required to advertise it, but they do pass a resolution. So if you are entering into a plan with the state, they have to pass a resolution saying that we're going to be doing this reval. And you only enter in a plan with the state if you want that $5 back, up to $5 per parcel back from them. If you don't care about getting that money back, you never have to enter in the state. You never have to do anything with advertising or passing resolutions, but it would definitely behoove them to let the residents know. Before COVID, that was one thing that we always had planned to, we keep the town boards updated through our monthly town board information that we give them, our report. But we always wanted to say, hey, let's schedule a special day at a bigger, building, maybe the town barns or something, have all the residents come in so we can go over something like this to say, hey, we're doing a reval, this is why. Because the more that you get out there to everybody, the better it will be. So you don't have to, but it's definitely recommended that you let the constituents know what's going so you don't blindside anyone. Have you noticed that the Amish community is paying huge prices for farms? At least someone is buying. Yes. The Amish they're a unique subset of buyers. They've driven up the price, especially. I live in the town of Napoli, and that region, the Amish, older Amish, goes north and even goes into Chautauqua County, and Allegheny County has them. They drove up the prices of vacant land a lot. So we're starting to see just $3,000 on just regular vacant land. They're paying $10,000 up in the Finger Lakes per acre for vacant land and for farmland. Yeah, it's driving up the price because they want that land. There's not a lot of land to go around. For farms, not seeing a big change, but there are the big corporations that are buying the smaller farms. So that's where we're seeing the values of farms being driven by those bigger corporations buying up the small farms, because that's how farming is going, unfortunately. You can't survive on 100 cattle. It would be hard to. You need bigger farms. You need 500 cattle now to run a sustaining business and not be losing money. We just had a couple of our bigger farms be bought out by even bigger farms in this county. And you're welcome for the presentation. I guess, let's see, I think I went through all the questions.